dreams unspoken, bonds unshaken. Through the fire, through the fear, still we stand, we're still here. Lost in time, the past won't save us. Faith is shattered, fate enslaves us. Yet the dawn still dares to rise through the storm in endless skies. Light still shines beyond the fight, through the pain, through the night. Hold the sky, don't let it fall. Stand together, hear the call.
Sensible Hysteria, Book 1, Caper La Verte. Intermission 1, Echoes of Empire.
Now listen closely, for I am about to recount the tale of 4 souls whose actions set the very ground trembling beneath them. Damas, Brand, Koga, and Aang are not merely names recorded in some forgotten ledger. They are the sparks that ignited a conflagration, the very catalyst that brought this empire to its knees. First, there is Damas, a cunning and elusive figure, moving through shadowed corridors with a purpose that belies a fateful destiny. Every calculated step he takes is a slow march toward an inevitable doom that will haunt him long after his final breath. A sorrow as deep and enduring as the darkest abyss. Then comes Brand, who tore through the established order like wildfire on a parched plain. His ambition burned with an intensity that defied restraint, and with each daring act, he scorched the old guard, leaving marks of defiance on the heart of our society. Brand's reckless challenge to convention was the fuel that would see the mighty edifice of the Shori crumble beneath the weight of its own ruin. Consider next Aang, a steadfast guardian once known for his unwavering honor, now torn apart by inner conflict. His loyalty, once as immovable as ancient stone, shatters under the relentless pressure of betrayal. Caught in a relentless battle between duty and defiance, Aang is condemned to endure a torment that even the finality of death cannot offer reprieve. And lastly, there is Koga, the wild card, the unpredictable force that defies all expectation. His every action is as erratic as a storm sweeping through desolation, a reminder that fate itself sometimes dances beyond the bounds of mortal design. Koga's unpredictable nature stirred chaos as though a tempest had been unleashed, foretelling a future where even the mercy of death pales in comparison to the eternal damnation that awaits. Together, these 4 figures heralded a reckoning, a revolution that transformed the Shori Empire into naught but ash. Their deeds, steeped in unyielding hubris and destined for a punishment far graver than death, ignited the collapse of the old order and paved the way for a rebirth forged in fire and sorrow. Now, if you believe that this is the entirety of our lamentable saga, permit me to delve further. For at the very heart of the Shori Empire beat the soul of the grand temple of the gods, a majestic half-circle adorned with intricate carvings and gilded in the light of a forgotten divinity. This was no mere edifice of stone and mortar. It was a sacred archive of history, a living testament to the unity and diversity of faith, where each of its 18 sanctuaries, dedicated to deities from Abadar to Nethys, sang together in a celestial chorus. At the center of this revered complex stood the Tower of the Shori, a monument ever in flux, chronicling triumph and defeat alike. It rose as a symbol of the Empire's eternal struggle, a record of divine judgment upon our mortal endeavors. The very same forces that sculpted that hallowed structure were mirrored in the hearts of Damas, Bran, Koga, and Aang. Their ruinous exploits, wild and catastrophic, echoed the timeless dance between creation and destruction inscribed within those sacred walls. So, when you next stand before the Temple of the Gods, remember that every carving, every gilded detail, and every brick of that ever-evolving tower bears witness to our perpetual struggle. It is both a chronicle of our illustrious past and a solemn prophecy of a future where the divine and the damned will collide in a fury that echoes through the ages, a testament to the tragic consequences of unbridled pride and ambition.
Sensible Hysteria, Book 1, Caper La Verte, Chapter 3, Chasing the Wind, Embracing the Loss.
In the shimmering heart of the casino's main floor, the air buzzed with anticipation and delight. Guests moved among dazzling chandeliers and lively slot machines, their faces lit with the thrill of the gamble. Amid the vibrant crowd, a trio stood apart, not for ostentation, but for their carefully concealed identities. Aang Blackthorn, Brand Nightshade, and Koga 1,000 Faces, dressed in crisp military uniforms as part of their disguise, blended seamlessly into the revelry, their presence hinting at secrets beneath the surface of celebration. In a stylish alcove, a small, intimate space offering a brief respite from the glamorous chaos, the stage was set for a moment of inspiration. The atmosphere was celebratory and electric, with every guest reveling in the promise of fortune and the art of the gamble. Then, as if summoned by the very pulse of the night, Harriet Barlays stepped forward. With a confident smile and a sparkle in her eye, she addressed the gathering.
Friends, comrades in chaos, tonight we stand at the precipice of possibility. I love nothing more than watching you all throw caution to the wind, risking it all in pursuit of that elusive next gamble. It's in the crackle of uncertainty where our true fire ignites. The thrill of chasing the wind, the sweet surrender in the embrace of a loss. Look around you. Every daring step, every calculated risk is a declaration that we will not live in the dull gray of safety, but in the vivid hues of chance and consequence. Our victories, as fleeting as they may be, are not measured by the outcome, but by the audacity of the pursuit. And when we stumble, we do so with pride, for even in defeat we learn, we grow, and we prepare for the next daring leap. So I say, seize the moment. Revel in the roller coaster of fortune, the exhilarating highs, the humbling lows. Let our passion for risk be the spark that lights the fire under our ambitions. Tonight, we chase the win, we celebrate the lose, and we become legends of our own making.
Aang's eyes were sharp as he leaned in close, his voice barely rising above a murmur.
I've been watching the perimeters, and I've got a lead. There's a red-eyed elf, angry, trigger-happy, the kind who wouldn't hesitate to pull his weapon. I'm convinced he's been posted right at the safe, guarding the contracts.
Bran's features hardened as he nodded, his tone laced with both concern and resolve.
That makes sense. And you know, Harriet, she's completely unhinged tonight. If we're going to pull this off, we need to keep her busy, away from our real target. We're going to have to create a distraction big enough to pull her out of the equation.
Koga, 1,000 Faces, whose shifting expressions betrayed a mix of mischief and calculation, reached into the folds of his uniform and produced a battered clown doll. Its painted smile was disturbingly out of place amid the opulence of the casino, and its eyes gleamed with a wild, dangerous energy.
"Take a look at this," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "I slipped it a bit of gold earlier, and the little fiend practically promised it can cause a distraction like no other. It's violent, always itching for permission to to stab anything or anyone in its path. That kind of chaos is exactly what we need.
Their voices blended with the subdued murmur of the private space, each word a careful thread, woven into the fabric of their intricate plan. As the trio exchanged these crucial details, the reality of the night's high-stakes gamble settled in. The low hum of the casino wrapped around them, a steady undercurrent of clinking glasses, laughter, and the rhythmic shuffle of cards. Aang, Brand, and Koga stood close, their conversation masked by the endless chatter of guests chasing their next thrill. Ong kept his voice measured, his eyes scanning the floor as he spoke.
I think we can get to the helm. If we take control of it, we could force this whole damn ship to run aground. That wouldn't just be a distraction, it'd be the distraction. Everyone, Herod included, would be scrambling.
Brand exhaled, weighing the words.
That's not just a distraction, that's a catastrophe. You really want to be on board when this place is coming apart?
Ong gave him a knowing look.
If we do our job right, we won't be.
Koga smirked, shifting his weight as he turned the battered clown doll over in his hands. The thing had been eerily cooperative so far, a little too eager. He crouched slightly, holding it up so its painted eyes met his.
What do you think, little guy? If we go through with this, can you make your mess when we start messing with the helm?
The doll twitched, its head jerking to the side as if hearing a tune only it could understand. Then its mouth stretched into a grin, voice lilting with excitement.
Oh, I like that. That's a real mess. Tell me when and I'll make it loud.
Koga chuckled, shaking his head.
Yeah, you'll do just fine.
Brand ran a hand over his jaw, exhaling through his nose.
So, just to be clear, we take the helm, crash the ship, and while that's happening, we let a knife-happy doll run wild?
Ong nodded.
That's the idea.
Koga patted the doll's head like a dog that had just learned a new trick.
I like this plan.
Reckless, dangerous. Exactly their kind of job. The clown doll scampered off, its little painted grin bobbing in the dim casino lights as it made its way toward the bar. The thing moved with unsettling ease, slipping between legs, under tables, unnoticed in the revelry of the hen house. It had its mission. It was waiting for the right moment. Meanwhile, Aang, Brand, and Koga moved in the opposite direction, vanishing into the casino's winding corridors. Their uniforms made them blend in, but the moment they left the main floor, subtlety became paramount. They moved in silence, slipping past occupied rooms and dimly lit hallways until they reached the lower levels of the ship. Down here, the ship changed. The luxury of the upper decks was replaced with metal grates and heavy pipes, the air thick with heat and the deep mechanical hum of engines working tirelessly. The narrow passageways sloped downward, bringing them deeper into the ship's bulge. The bulge was dark, save for the occasional flicker of maintenance lights casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. The rhythmic churning of the engines filled the space, a constant mechanical heartbeat propelling the ship forward. Thick pipes lined the walls, sweating steam in the heat, and the floor vibrated beneath their boots. At the very front of the bulge, the darkness gave way to an eerie glow. A wide open space emerged, its floor steel and solid, its walls lined with reinforced glass. The forward section of the ship stretched out before them, an unobstructed view of the water and the distant horizon shimmering under the moonlight. At the center of this open space stood the helm. A single steering column rose from the floor, polished and simple, flanked by a heavy lever for adjusting speed. It was an isolated, lonely place, far from the noise and life above, tucked away in the belly of the beast. Aang stepped forward first, eyes scanning the empty chamber.
This is it.
He murmured. Brand exhaled, resting a hand on his hip as he took in the vast view of the sea ahead. Kind of poetic. We take the wheel. We take everything with it. Koga grinned. rolling his shoulders.
Let's make sure the doll is having fun before we make our move.
Above them, somewhere in the heart of the henhouse, the clown doll was no doubt waiting for the moment to let the chaos begin. The hum of the engines swallowed the sound of their footsteps as the three crept into the helm's open chamber. The ship's bulge stretched around them, the vibrating steel floor beneath their feet, the glass windows ahead, reflecting the shimmering sea. The plan was clear. Take the helm, send the ship crashing, let the doll run wild upstairs. It should have been simple. Then Aang saw him. Standing at the helm, hand resting lazily on the steering column, was the red-eyed elf. His gaze burned like embers in the dim light, a wicked grin stretching across his sharp features. There was no shock, no surprise, just anticipation. He had been waiting. Aang barely had time to process the horror before he breathed out a single word.
Fuck!
The red-eyed elf moved instantly, his revolver snapping up, his grin widening as he squeezed the trigger. The explosion of gunfire roared through the chamber, and the three dove for cover as the bullet tore through the air between them. Brand hit the ground first, rolling behind a stack of metal crates as another shot cracked against the steel beside him. Koga flattened himself against a nearby pipe, hands already forming arcane symbols in the air. Aang, heart pounding, ducked behind a panel, hearing the click of the revolver's hammer being drawn back again. The red-eyed elf laughed, a sharp, almost delighted sound.
Oh, you boys picked the wrong room to fuck with.
Brand didn't answer. He moved. With a flourish, his rapier came free, its blade igniting in a burst of fire, casting flickering orange light across the chamber. He lunged, his sword carving through the air, forcing the elf to sidestep just as Koga's magic struck. The chamber warped. Shadows flickered unnaturally, the space around them shifting as multiple, shifting versions of the three appeared in a haze of illusions. The red-eyed elf's grin faltered, his aim wavering as his revolver snapped toward one illusion, then another. Aang took the opening. Rushing forward, he swung at the elf's midsection, forcing him to retreat just as Brand's blade slashed upward. The elf barely twisted out of the way, the edge of the flaming rapier nicking his coat. His revolver snapped back up, and this time the bullet grazed Brand's shoulder. Brand snarled but didn't falter. He pressed forward, footwork sharp and precise, his blade a constant searing threat. Aang flanked him, throwing punches and feints to keep the elf moving, keep him from settling into a rhythm. But the elf was fast. Too fast. With a sudden, brutal shift, he caught Brand's blade against the barrel of his revolver, twisting hard and forcing the fencer off balance. At the same time, he spun, slamming a boot into Aang's side, sending him staggering backward. Koga wove another illusion, trying to distort the elf's vision, but the red-eyed bastard didn't hesitate. He fired, the bullet punching through the illusion to where Koga should have been, missing by only an inch. The fight was turning. Every step they took, the elf matched them. Every trick they tried, he countered. His speed, his precision, it was relentless. Aang's mind raced. They needed to change the game.
Koga,
He shouted, dodging another shot.
the lever.
Koga's eyes snapped to the control panel. He didn't hesitate. With a surge of movement, he rushed toward the speed control lever. The elf saw it, his grin twisting into a snarl. He moved to fire dash. But Brand was there. He lunged, his rapier sweeping in a wide arc, forcing the elf to turn his full attention back on him. Flames licked across the air as Brand struck with everything he had, sword meeting revolver in a clash of steel and fire. Koga reached the lever. With a sharp intake of breath, he grabbed it and rammed it forward. The ship lurched. The engines howled as the sudden acceleration slammed through the entire vessel. The force nearly threw them all from their feet, the metal floor groaning under the strain. But Koga wasn't done. Snarling, he wrenched the lever hard, too hard, until it snapped clean off in his hands. The ship bucked violently, its speed now unchecked. The elf's balance wavered for just a second. Aang seized his moment. Charging forward, he swung low, not at the elf, but at the glass ahead of the helm. The impact shattered it instantly. A roar of wind and sea air exploded into the chamber as shards of glass sprayed outward, the ship now barreling at uncontrollable speed with no barrier between them and the ocean ahead. Brand struggled, his blade locked against the elf's revolver, but the shifting floor, the roaring wind, the chaos, it all worked against them. The elf was still standing, still grinning, his crimson eyes alight with the thrill of the fight, and Brand was barely holding him back.
Sensible Hysteria. Book 1, Caper La Verte. Chapter 4, The House Always Burns.
A deafening crack split the air as the reinforced windows exploded outward, shards flying like deadly stars. The sudden rush of wind and water swallowed the helm. The ship lurched, and Aang felt himself being pulled. For a split second, his mind refused to register what was happening. Then, gravity took hold. He was falling. The ship roared forward, engines screeching, speed unchecked. His back hit the open air, his limbs flailing, and then cold. The vacuum of pressure ripped through the room. The ocean swallowed him whole. Aang barely had time to register the mistake before he felt it. A sudden, merciless pull. The ship was rocketing forward at breakneck speed, and the open wind sucked at him, an invisible hand grabbing his body and tearing him from his footing. His stomach lurched. There was nothing to grab onto. No time to fight it. No moment to think. The wind claimed him, dragging him out into open air. He barely managed a single breath before the black ocean swallowed him whole. The impact was a brutal punch to the gut. The waves hit like a brick wall, slamming the air from his lungs. Cold, impossibly deep, suffocating. The world above became an unreachable blur as he sank, limbs thrashing against the darkness, pressing in from all sides. Salt burned his throat as he struggled against the current. The ship's monstrous wake dragging him down, deeper and deeper. He kicked, twisted, fought, but the water was unrelenting. A sudden current spun him like a rag doll, tossing him in a direction he couldn't name. His vision blurred. Up, down, his chest burned. He needed air. He forced himself to calm, think, move toward the light. A flicker above, a shimmer, the surface. Aang pushed everything into a final, desperate kick. His body broke the surface with a gasping roar, lungs screaming for air. He flailed, barely keeping afloat as waves crashed over him, forcing salt into his mouth. But he was alive. And in the distance, the ship, a monstrous silhouette tearing across the water, flames beginning to lick at its hull. Koga's breath came fast as he shoved his way into the safe room, sweat slick on his skin from the ship's unnatural heat. The space reeked of old money, power, and the unmistakable weight of things that should never belong to one person alone. But in that moment, he wasn't thinking about that. He was thinking about treasure. Stacks of gold bars were piled in perfect, obscene towers, glistening under the flickering emergency lights. Velvet-lined chests sat open, rivers of diamonds and rubies spilling out. More wealth than one could spend in a lifetime just sitting there, waiting. And the papers. Files lined the walls, some neatly sealed, others scattered. Documents stamped with elegant sigils, names signed in perfect ink. Contracts, bargains, some in blood. But Koga's eyes flicked toward something else. Something beautiful. A necklace, hanging delicately on a black silk stand, emeralds the size of quail eggs, their facets glowing like liquid poison in the dim light. The gold setting was intricate, filigree twisting into elegant, ancient shapes. This wasn't just wealth. It was history. a piece that belonged to kings and monsters alike. His fingers twitched. The job. The job, he reminded himself. The contracts. That was why they were here. But the necklace was so close. He shouldn't. His hand was already reaching for it. The second he touched the chain, he felt it. A weight. A wrongness. Like it knew it had been taken. But greed. Greed was a powerful thing. Koga yanked it free. A thrill shot through him as the cold metal coiled in his palm, the emeralds glowing against his skin. That's when the door burst open. Koga whirled, heart pounding. Brand stood in the doorway, drenched, breathless, wild-eyed, his sword still aflame despite his soaked clothes. His gaze swept the room like a man possessed, ignoring the treasures completely. Brand moved without hesitation, hands flying to the contracts.
Find them!
He snapped.
Now!
Koga forced himself to blink, to shake off the pull of the necklace. Right. The job. They ripped through the papers, tearing aside anything useless. And then... there. Files bound in leather, contracts scrawled in dark ink, each one carrying a name that had been stolen. Brand grabbed them. No hesitation. Into the waterproof pouch. Sealed tight. Done. Then, the floor tilted. The ship was screaming beneath them, the metal howling, the scent of smoke thick in the air. Brand grabbed Koga by the coat.
Time's up! Move!
They ran. The ocean swallowed them whole. The shock of the cold was like being punched in the chest, stealing their breath before they could scream. Salt stung their eyes, filled their mouths, weighed their clothes down like chains. The ship's wake dragged at them, pulling them beneath the churning water before they could even think to fight it. Ung surfaced first, gasping, hacking up seawater as he flailed against the rolling waves. His muscles burned, his lungs screamed, but he was alive. He blinked rapidly, vision blurred, head snapping in every direction, searching. Another splash. Koga broke through the surface next, his mask torn off, his dark hair plastered to his face, coughing up half the ocean. His eyes were wide, wild, blinking rapidly as he fought to stay afloat.
Shit!
He gasped.
That was
He coughed violently.
not part of the plan.
Brand!
Aang shouted over the roar of the sea. Then, a final splash. Brand emerged, soaked to the bone, his coat heavy with seawater, his sword still strapped to his hip. He choked, spitting salt, his body fighting the waves. But as soon as his head tilted up, his wild, breathless grin said everything. They were alive. And they had won. For a moment, the three of them just floated, exhausted, weightless in the water, adrenaline still screaming through their veins. The world had gone mad around them. Flames, sirens, distant screams, but none of it mattered. Not the chaos, not the wreckage. Only the victory. Then Ong, grinning like a lunatic, laughing between ragged breaths, threw a fist in the air.
We fucking did it.
Koga wheezed, half laughing, half drowning.
We're
He coughed up more salt water.
alive.
Brand, breathless, soaked, shaking his head in utter disbelief, lifted the waterproof pouch of contracts above his head.
And we have the damn files.
The three of them roared in triumph, their cheers lost to the endless sea. None of them turned back. Not to the burning ship, once a glittering empire of wealth and pleasure, now a sinking wreck of twisted metal and shattered glass. The crash had been violent. The ship had plowed into the docks with an earth-shaking boom, its hull tearing into the wooden piers like a beast devouring its prey. Flames billowed from the top decks, roaring into the night sky, turning the ocean's surface into a dance of flickering orange and red. The luxurious henhouse was now a hellscape, lifeboats scrambling to get away, guests screaming, desperate figures leaping overboard into the dark water. The once elegant casino tilted at an unnatural angle, its front end nearly submerged, its windows shattered, its lights flickering like a dying heartbeat. The docks were in chaos. Dock workers and guards were shouting, some running toward the burning wreck, others running away. The sound of alarm bells rang through the night, growing louder as the first rescue ships rushed toward the catastrophe. The water near the ship was a floating graveyard of debris, splintered wood, shattered glass, gold coins spilling from the wreck, drifting uselessly in the waves. But Aang, Koga, and Brand, they didn't care, didn't turn, didn't look. Because in that moment, in the freezing ocean,